And we're back in the other gym on a Thursday morning before the crack of dawn, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your very early and frigid, not surprisingly, Thursday morning here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, it occurred to me that I have not done an episode of the continuing series called The Great Movies in probably a couple of months. So I figure I owe you one of those episodes, and if you remember, the idea is not to just choose the standards, Citizen Kane, Vertigo, Rules of the Game, or even a film by Spielberg or Scorsese such as A Taxi Driver or Jaws. The idea of this series has always been to take films which I consider to reach that exalted level of a truly great motion picture, but is not generally put on that exalted level. And I've tried to have some what I would consider interesting choices in films that many people do consider to be in a sort of top tier, such as, for example, Gary Ross's Pleasantville from the late 1990s is also part of the series. But this is going to be a deep cut. This is a movie that I remember when it came out. 3 of my friends from Bev Francis Powerhouse Gym saw this movie during its opening weekend, and spoiler alert, they didn't like it. It just didn't hit. And I think that part of the problem was they went in with the wrong expectations. They thought it was going to be a different movie than what it actually was and is. And this is something that happens when the studio is not sure. When I say the studio, I mean the amorphous Hollywood. It's not a question of a particular studio. It's just a question of the way the Hollywood machinery works. And Roger Ebert, the late great film critic and Pulitzer Prize winner, talked about this concept, which is that studios sometimes, they promote the movie they wish they had made instead of the movie they actually did. And if you put the wrong idea into the heads of patrons, they may go see the movie, but they're less likely to recommend it to others if they feel like they've been conned. And Changing Lanes was promoted in a way that almost suggested an up-tempo thriller. That's not this movie. In fact, I would say that Changing Lanes is unclassifiable, because there are elements of the thriller, there are elements of the classic revenge story, there are elements of drama, it's a character study, it's a kind of a summary of one man who had earlier in his life crashed out due to alcoholism and who now has rebuilt his life and is making good money and is just one step, if you'll forgive the pun, but one step away from actualizing his potential as a professional, as a father, and possibly once again as a husband. Changing Lanes, the 2002 film directed by the British filmmaker, terrific Roger Michell, contains what I believe to be the finest performance that Ben Affleck has given in a movie. And it's not really a criticism of Ben Affleck to say that. In my opinion, I believe that he is a better writer and filmmaker than he is a film actor. And we could see the same on a different scale of Quentin Tarantino. It's very rare to do everything at the level of Orson Welles. Orson Welles was an incredible writer, top 5 all-time filmmaker, and he was an incredible film actor too, and he had a perfect speaking voice for the stage and the screen. That's not baseball, Susan. Like, you're not supposed to be able to be that great at everything. But Ben Affleck found something in this movie, and it is not a stretch to say that virtually anyone, short of Daniel Day-Lewis, Al Pacino, Bobby D, short of that level, if you're in a movie with Samuel L. Jackson and you can even hold your own, you've achieved something. And I believe that Ben in this movie, if anything, outshines one of the GOATs, and it's incredible, he only has 1 Oscar nomination for Pulp Fiction, Samuel L. Jackson. So this is a movie, it's one of those kinds of films that if you sort of drop in early and you don't know the film, or you don't recognize the setting, oh, wait a minute, that's Ben, and I see Samuel L. Jackson, you start calculating, okay, well, Ben ended up playing Batman in DC, and Sam plays Nick Fury in the MCU, so this is not a superhero movie. You start calculating, is this like a Captain Marvel type deal? But the film kind of presents Samuel Jackson's Doyle Gibson as the lead, but then there are times where it feels like it's more Ben's Gavin Bannock. And the film, and I talked about how my all-time favorite movie, Chariots of Fire, uses a two-protagonist structure or two-hero structure to make it more simple, but it's basically what it is. This film does that. Each man has roughly the same screen time. These are both very intelligent and clever men who are going through crises of varying degrees at the beginning of the film, because Doyle is a recovering alcoholic, and Gavin Bannock is a guy who wants to be please forgive the cliche, he wants to be a better human, but he's in a very difficult position. He is a young, rising lawyer with the kind of big corporate New York City firm it's easy to make fun of. And speaking of Pacino, Devil's Advocate, it's this kind of a firm in the movie Changing Lanes, but instead of Big Al as the devil, you have Sidney Pollack, also a fantastic filmmaker, but as an actor, Sidney Pollack was able to impart levels of condescension, arrogance, and menace. You almost can't do it as well as Sidney Pollack. So essentially, he plays the same kind of scumbag, Sidney Pollack, in Changing Lanes that he played for Stanley Kubrick 3 years earlier when he was the replacement actor for Harvey Keitel, who either quit or got fired, depending on who's telling the story. But in that movie, Pollack plays this massively successful businessman who has like a $50 million Manhattan apartment, and he hosts the party that Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, as Bill and Alice Harford, go to at the beginning of the movie, and then that is the kind of inciting incident. So in this film, Gavin Bannock is this rising young attorney who tries to pretend that he does not have a conscience. At the beginning of the movie, he's getting ready to do a power of attorney thing where they have this, stop me if you heard this before, this like billionaire client who supposedly, when he was just about on his deathbed, signed over power of attorney to Sidney Pollack's powerful Al Pacino Devil's Advocate level law firm. And they're just going to loot this guy for tens of millions of dollars. Now, nobody says that, but that's the implication. So you have the young attorney who acts as if he's okay with the fact that he's about to bring this power of attorney into court, knowing it's bullshit, knowing that he basically, it's so disgusting, he all but put his hand around the hand of the elderly billionaire to trace his signature. It's beyond bad. But it looks like he's going to do it. But on the other side, Doyle Gibson has a court appointment, and it's a custody hearing where he is about to purchase a home for his two sons, one of whom's name is Stevie, and I can still hear Samuel L. Jackson yelling out, "Stevie! Stevie!" It even became a thing also at the gym. One of our friends, Steve, we used to yell Stevie like it was in the movie, "Stevie!" But one guy, ironically, is going up the ladder of success and not doing it the right way. And the other guy is trying to climb, and he is doing it the right way. And this movie gets into, well, what happens if you do the right thing and you just keep getting fucked? And unfortunately, that's the way, it just be like that sometimes. So these are two men who it would be very unlikely that they would ever meet. Ben's law firm is at a level where he's unlikely to represent an individual such as Doyle Gibson professionally. But both guys are in a hurry, and Doyle Gibson is feeling good about his life because it's not just that he's trying to buy a home. His ex-wife has talked about moving herself and the boys to Oregon. And what he wants to do, because he has gotten his credit situation squared away, he hasn't had a touch of alcohol in I don't remember how many years. He's gotten himself together, as I said, professionally. And all he wants is to work out some kind of a custody situation where they share custody, and he is okay with his ex, who he clearly still loves, and maybe still loves him. He's buying the house for them. He's buying this house, not for himself, but so they can work out some kind of a visitation scenario, and they don't have to move to Oregon. So everything that we see from Doyle Gibson, this is a really good dude who made some terrible decisions and has a disease. And he's doing the best he can every day. So if we're being objective, we like him a lot more than Gavin Bannock. It's not even close. So these two guys who are not supposed to meet in the original version of The Matrix, where nothing out of the ordinary or extraordinary takes place, they're not supposed to ever cross paths. But it just so happens that Ben is racing to the courthouse for his bullshit power of attorney, which he knows is bullshit, but the two bosses, one of whom is, as I say, Sidney Pollack, the other is another phenomenal cheat code supporting actor. The story of the movie Changing Lanes, and where we left off when I was interrupted, was that Ben Affleck's character of Gavin Bannock is racing to his court situation. And it's again another cliche, but it makes sense. He's distracted because there is a lot of ducks that have to be precisely in a row. And when you're at that level in the professional world, you're going to be checking and rechecking, and not even just double checking, triple checking to make sure you have everything in order, because there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. And the Gavin Bannock we meet at this point in the film, although I like to think he wants to be a better person, he does not come across as anything other than a bit of a chaser of an attorney. And I won't use the word that normally goes before chaser, but he's a bit of a shyster. And he's just doing the bidding of his bosses, the Richard Jenkins and Sidney Pollack characters. So he and Doyle Gibson, they have a fender bender on the FDR Drive. It's funny, I almost forgot the name of the road. You know how many times during my NYU days that I drove back and forth on the FDR Drive, especially when I was returning from or going to Atlantic City to play blackjack in my Rain Man phase in 1996, 1998. So there is a fender bender. The only way that these guys would realistically ever meet would be something stupid like a fender bender. Now, fortunately, no one is injured. Neither guy gets hurt in the fender bender. And Ben is racing to court, but so is Samuel L. Jackson's Doyle Gibson. Both guys need to get to court, but Gavin Bannock simply wants to move on with the rest of his morning as quickly as he possibly can. Well, sorry about that. He wants to move on with his morning as quickly as he possibly can. He's not interested in, it isn't like under normal circumstances, of course he would exchange insurance cards, but he, in his mind, cannot be late for this hearing. But Doyle Gibson wants to do this the right way. It was an accident. Thank goodness we're both okay, sir. And he wants to, as part of his program, as part of his attempts at bettering himself, he doesn't want to half-ass even a car accident of exchanging information. He wants to follow the appropriate steps and the appropriate protocols. All Gavin Bannock wants to do is, here's a blank check, just write whatever you have to, I gotta get the fuck out of here, I'm sorry, better luck next time. And he actually says the phrase, better luck next time. And it's difficult in this moment to not see Samuel Jackson's Doyle Gibson as he's the good guy and Gavin Bannock is the bad guy, because one man is in a much worse position personally. Doyle Gibson is, like, this car accident just in and of itself could cost him his day. His wife could end up moving, maybe he won't get the loan, but if he doesn't make the hearing, she might just take the kids and fly the coop. So he's still trying to do the right thing. And the worst that happens to Gavin Bannock, if something in court doesn't go exactly right, well, maybe he won't get a promotion, maybe he won't make $10 million or get some kind of a parachute situation, a golden parachute where they just, either way, his life is not going to be, it's not going to be negatively impacted for decades in the manner of Doyle Gibson because of this just stupid fender bender. So Doyle Gibson ends up not getting to court in time. And it looks like he's going to be shit out of luck. And at the same time, Gavin Bannock's rash actions after the fender bender, he has forgotten the most important component. All the things that he kept checking and rechecking, the main power of attorney form that he traced the old man, the whole
horrendous thing, he doesn't have it. He left it at the scene of the accident. He was fumbling around with the suitcase and everything and the briefcase. He doesn't have it. He's got to get it back. And without going into the minutia, that sets off a cascade of escalation between the two guys, where at various points over the next, let's say, hour of the movie, each man wants vengeance upon the other while the other is trying to make amends. And that also feels very, very real. That sometimes, as we say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And neither of these guys, under any other circumstance, would have wanted to just hurt the other. But given what's happened, Gavin Bannock is going to be SOL if he doesn't get that form back. And he makes a mistake and decides to go after Doyle Gibson at a time where he should have just taken an extra second. Yes, it sucks that you don't have the form in court, and yeah, you're going to get dressed down by your potential future father-in-law. That's the other thing. His fiancée is played by a terrific Amanda Peet, who had a lot of similar kind of roles in that area in a few years. Oh no, I'm sorry, 1 year later, she plays Jack Nicholson's less than half his age girlfriend in Something's Gotta Give. In this film, she plays his fiancée, and she doesn't really have that much to do, but he almost feels like the kid who is going to have to talk to his teacher, and the teacher is dressing him down and telling him, you fucked up, go to the principal's office, you're going to have to talk to the administrators, you might get kicked out of school. So he doesn't think it through, he goes after Gavin Bannock, and it begins this escalating war of wills, where you wonder, is either guy going to crack, or are they just going to continue trying to ruin each other's life? And the first time I saw the movie, I didn't think that I was going to like it as much as I did, because in broad strokes, it seems very unlikely that all of this stuff could happen in one day. But when you get into the minute-by-minute reality of the life of each man at various points in the film, the more you think about it, the more believable it seems. And it is strange where you have a film that Samuel L. Jackson gets to play such a kind of live wire, a dynamic character, and he goes stretches of the film where his, kind of famed movie temper, get these motherfucking snakes off this motherfucking thing. He doesn't really do that for huge chunks of the film. Ben's character is more volatile, and that's another thing that you're not expecting with this movie. It isn't so much that the men play against type, it's that they feel more like real people than kind of falling back on the tics and the typical performance styles of each guy. Yes, Samuel Jackson has a few moments where he kind of loses his shit, but this is not Jules Winfield from Pulp Fiction. This is Doyle Gibson, a struggling guy who has not been struggling that much lately and is this close to doing something wonderful for himself and his family. And the irony is, if Gavin Bannock were to have, easily achieved his objectives, he would have enriched himself, enriched his future father-in-law and his fiancée, but at the expense of his soul. And that sounds like another cliche, but in the world of this film, it's not. And so this horrible day between the two guys continues, and it reaches a point where it almost feels like this is going to be a little bit of a Ridley Scott's The Duelist, with Harvey Keitel, and was it Keith Carradine? I don't even remember who his co-star was, where it just keeps escalating, and then you say, well, is it just going to end with two people dying? I don't know. If it were a European film, for sure. If you made this in France in the 60s, or Michelangelo Antonioni or Francois Truffaut or Jean-Luc Godard, I think they're both going to die. But in the world of this movie, you start asking yourself, is there a rapprochement? Is it possible that with all of the different moments where one guy tries to reach out a hand, not even in friendship, just a hand, and can we stop this fucking nonsense before we both die? Because that's not going to help anyone in our immediate circle. But you just keep saying, what could go right with all of the kind of horrendous bullshit that's already gone on, with these two guys? And William Hurt, an actor I talked about who I really, really like, it's not a very showy role, but he plays Samuel L. Jackson's sponsor. And he has a couple of really good moments in the film where it's not so much like he's not acting in his capacity as whatever he does in his professional life. He's only there to try to keep Doyle Gibson from returning to the bottle. Just whatever you have to do, don't drink any alcohol. I mean, it seems pretty obvious. It's easier said than done. So William Hurt shows up. And then you have another fantastic actor in Dylan Baker, who plays a kind of fixer. And you go this is one of those movies where you go back and say, well, if each guy could take back one thing that they did in their escalating feud, Gavin Bannock should not have visited the Dylan Baker character, because that was something that proves to be very difficult to undo. You can make all kinds of accountant jokes and CPA jokes, and the character that Dylan Baker plays is probably both a CPA and a guy who passed the Series 7. He is a financial wizard from every angle, and he's the kind of guy all those years ago could figure out how to ruin someone's credit. You see all this stuff kick off, where how to repair your credit in 2 weeks. I was at 320 and now I'm 750, whatever it is. This is the opposite. How to destroy someone's entire existence with a couple of keystrokes. This is the sort of thing where the internet was still somewhat of a new concept as far as how much information is on the internet. And can you really ruin someone's life in less than 5 seconds? Yes and yes. So the Dylan Baker character destroys Doyle Gibson's credit rating, and that spins the film into another very, very negative and nasty direction. And on the one hand, we want Doyle Gibson to stay on the straight and narrow. We don't know if there is any redemption for Gavin Bannock, but at a certain point in the film, Gavin Bannock finds something. He realizes that even if I'm permanently screwed, he doesn't say this out loud, but this is what we get. This is a movie where the words don't count as much as the actions and behavior. He's just going to try to repair the damage that he's done, even if it means his career and his future bride and future father-in-law. And he takes certain steps, and you wonder, is this gonna even matter? And then Doyle Gibson also takes certain steps, and you say, is this even gonna matter? Because these two guys can agree to stop trying to first fuck up each other's life and then maybe kill one another. But if Gavin Bannock can't ever work as a lawyer anymore, well, what good is he, right? Even as young as he is, he'll have to do something else. And if Doyle Gibson's wife and 2 sons end up moving across the country, well, he would see that as a life defeat. And then you start saying, well, unfortunately, this is the sort of thing that would take him off the current path that he has been on until the stupid fender bender on the FDR Drive this morning. So I've said that I believe this is the best performance that Ben Affleck has ever given. And he has given some really good turns. Good Will Hunting as Chucky. He's really, really good. The Last Duel a couple of years ago, the Ridley Scott film with Matt Damon and Adam Driver. The irony of that film is it's Matt Damon's movie, but I remember, Ben, and I remember especially how dynamic Adam Driver is in that film. I think that film is way underrated. Well, not underrated. It got great reviews, but it bombed at the box office. I just don't think that people were ready for that kind of very difficult and challenging film as Changing Lanes, a very difficult and challenging film, although this film was a box office hit. It turned a profit in the States, and it did better overseas than you would have expected. So this film, Changing Lanes, the budget, the marketing, it was somewhere around $45 million, and the movie grossed around somewhere between 95 and 100 million worldwide. So we're not talking about a massive hit, but the distributors ended up making money, the theater owners made money, and for a challenging film, which got good reviews, but the audience score is not as high as the critical score. This was a movie that a lot of people went in with the wrong expectation and came out saying, you know what, I don't know that the movie really works that well, or whatever they may have, the takeaway might have been. But I've seen this film 3 times, and current day, circa 2025, with all of the really challenging independent films that we have seen over the last decade, and in the streaming era, there's much more of what you would call not just creative freedom, but great filmmakers taking risks and risking alienating audiences to tell these very serious and sober and difficult stories that don't always have a 1 + 1 = 2 plot and character revelations and all of that. And I feel like this is a film that will play better now than it did then, because no one is going to go in with the wrong expectation 23 plus years after it was released. This is a film that Roger Ebert had among his best of 2002. 2002 was a pretty good year for movies. You know, what was it, the Two Towers, or did that come out in 02 or 03? I think it came out in 02. But there were a lot of good movies in 2002. You know, Dennis Quaid had the two big films, The Rookie, the baseball movie about the pitcher Jimmy Morris, and he had Far From Heaven, the Todd Haynes film, where he had a lot of acclaim, and so did Julianne Moore as his wife. I think The Hours, speaking of Julianne Moore also, and Nicole Kidman. There's some really good movies that year. And Changing Lanes somehow, in some way, got lost in the shuffle because there were some critics that just didn't get it. As Ebert was giving it 4 stars and saying this is, you know, top 5 best movies of the year, there were other critics, 2 stars, 1.5. And I think people were just not in the mood for this sort of movie, this sort of role for Ben at that point in his career, and maybe not even the sort of role that Samuel Jackson plays at, you know, that point in his career. But I do believe that Changing Lanes is just a fantastic film, the kind of movie that really makes you think and makes you wonder, what would you do in the same situation? And would you ever actually try to get vengeance in the manner of these two guys? Because there are times where you get fucked over and you could do something, but you say, you know what? I'm not going to chase my losses because I could just end up making the situation worse. But this film argues that you could do all of that, but maybe the universe will still smile on you if ultimately you risk everything to do what you honestly believe to be the right thing. And that's one of the main takeaways of the movie Changing Lanes. And the title, I believe, is a metaphor for both guys, what they're trying to do with their lives. In the case of Doyle Gibson, it's very straightforward, but in the case of Gavin Bannock, it's not. He needs to change lanes to be the person that he can be, not the person on the path where he is just going to, this is a guy who's going to hell, as they like to say. And can he be redeemed? Well, you just have to watch the movie and draw your own conclusions. Changing Lanes from 2002, directed by Roger Michell, and starring Samuel L. Jackson, Ben Affleck, Richard Jenkins, Sidney Pollack, and Amanda Peet, the newest entry in our continuing series of the great movies. This has been episode, I think we're up to 650, wow, of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Thursday morning here with me in New York. And if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, and the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.